Meet my D&D campaign's most deadly assassin, Shiv the Silent. Hi everyone, All Things D&D is back with another story. This one's submitted by our viewer Shawn. Playing an assassin can be tricky. How do they fit into the party? How do you intertwine their motives with those of the group? I think this group does a great job of making it work. Tell us about your interesting group dynamics after listening to this story. The tavern was quite busy tonight as he entered. Luckily, his timed entrance had been silenced by a loud burst of laughter from a group of patrons. Good. He hated the attention that he would have garnered. He quietly took up the table in the corner, back to the wall, as he always would in establishments such as these. Best way to watch your back is with a solid covering of oak or stone. His pappy had taught him that, along with many other things he had come to know. He found that his time with him was never wasted, and he thought it came to him rather naturally. "What do you have, stranger?" the barmaid asked. She didn't seem too surprised at him, or that he seemed to have almost materialized at the table. He was in fact wearing a set of slightly baggy clothing, boots and gloves. But above all else was the foreboding hood and mask that he wore. He looked around at the patrons, all of whom seemed to be busy with their own conversations or festivities. He slowly pointed towards an empty table that had some leftovers of what appeared to be a steak and pork dinner that a young kobold was beginning to clean up. "Why don't I bring you a fresh bit, okay?" she says, to which Shiv nods his approval. He watched as the barmaid and the kobold walked back towards the kitchen. No doubt they employed, or rather owned, kobolds to do most of the cleaning, and quite possibly the cooking as well. He wasn't too surprised at this. He knew this area had a large population of them that were either owned or used for sport. That, and their stench was hard to miss even miles from out of town. He turned his attention towards the other patrons. A group of dwarves were on the far end of the bar, all singing a merry drinking tune, as a few were downing their drinks. Some had great mounds of foam near the corners of their beards, no doubt a sign that they'd been here a while. They had to be miners from the looks of their worn and dusty clothing and sooty faces. Would explain the boar cart and pickaxes he'd seen on his way into the tavern. At another table sat 4 adventurers, 2 males, 2 females. They were the source of the large amount of merriment that heralded his arrival. They were listening to one of the men, cleric by the looks, who was recounting their exploits from which they had just returned. His dialect was a bit strange, obviously not originally from this land, but had been here for a while to pick up a bit of the slang. Another bout of laughter erupts from the party as the cleric starts wildly flailing his arms. No doubt he was the energetic comedian of the group. The chiming of the doorbell draws the full attention of most everyone. Not Shiv, though he does glance in that direction. Another dwarf, this one much more rotund than his brethren. "Ah, Grogmel, you finally decided to join us." "I just had to run home first. The missus had a wee bit of something for me to bring you," he says as he retrieves a round object covered in cloth from his knapsack. "Some of the finest and sharpest cheddar she's ever made, lads. And what better to go with the meat, eh?" he shouts, and they all cheer in unison. "I've always had a hankering for your wife's cooking," said one of the others. "And I've always liked a lass that could cook as well as she looks." "Careful now, that's me sister you're on about," says a third. "And she's much more dwarf than any of us could handle." "Except for Grogmel, of course," says the second, which elicits another roar of deep bellowing laughter from all. "I tell you, if it wasn't for Grogmel, I don't know who." "Here you are, stranger." The barmaid had snuck up on Shiv. Not many can claim to have accomplished this feat, but he didn't show any signs that she had the drop on him. He slowly turned his head to look at her. "Will you be needing a drink?" she asks. Shiv replies by shaking his head slowly. "It'll be 5 copper," she says. Shiv reaches into his coin purse and pulls out a silver coin. He places it on the table for her. "I'll be back with the she starts, to which Shiv holds up his hand and shakes his head. "Well, thank you, stranger." And with that, she leaves him to his meal. Looking around, he's content to see that all are busy with their own agendas, to not even take notice to him. Satisfied, he lowers his head over the plate and removes his mask. The hood he wears provides adequate protection from prying eyes, which is good. He never really likes to have people watch him as he eats. The pork is excellent, even if it had been cooked a little longer than he'd like. The steak was, to say the least. Perhaps the seasoning is what gave it its unusual flavor. Danger. He could sense it. He stopped eating and replaced his mask. Looking up, he could see a figure taking a seat in the chair across from him. "Easy there, fellow. I'm just here to talk." It was the other male from the table of humans. This one was a little different. He was a tad paler than the others, half-breed. Would explain why I didn't hear him approaching. Was he really losing his touch, or just bad luck with these locals and their genetic heritages? "I couldn't help but notice you were here alone.
and after seeing how you eat, it's no wonder. After all, I never expected that you—" His voice trailed off as Shiv's hand produced a small dagger. Now, like I said, I've come to talk. Your secret's safe with me. After all, I don't want to get on the bad side of the assassin Shiv the Silent. Shiv tilts his head slightly. I can tell that you figured it out. I'm the one who's sent for an assassin, as much as it displeases me to do so. Although I knew one of you would come, I didn't know they would send you. But I guess it does make sense given our history. Also, I know the organization wouldn't want to screw the pooch on such a high-value target. I take it you have their name already. Shiv nods. Excellent. The reason behind all this is simple. My party and I, being from this region, cannot in good faith have this target eliminated by our own hands, as doing so would incur the wrath of several factions. However, if they were removed by a third party, such as yourself, then no one will bat an eye, as it'll seem business as usual and appear that a rival organization filed for the hit. As a paladin, I'm ashamed to have stooped so low, but ultimately our goal will be achieved and peace will have been secured. Shiv continues to stare at this man in silence, slowly lowering the blade he had to its sheath. I'm so sorry. Forgive my rudeness. My name's Obadiah, but you knew that already. He offers his hand to Shiv as he stands up. Shiv stares at him for a few heartbeats, and the sound of a hidden blade retracting breaks the silence between them. Obadiah raises an eyebrow as Shiv reaches across to return the handshake. This brought a smile to Shiv's face. He took pleasure in frightening people. You don't have to worry about a room. I've already paid for 2 weeks' worth for you to stay here at the tavern. 1 room for yourself and 2 rooms for me and the party. I figured you'd like it that way. Shiv nods and they release from the handshake. We're planning to head out on a scouting mission in the morning. You're welcome to join, or you can stay here to gather more information about the target. If you need me, Obadiah hands over a small round stone with a jewel inside of it. Don't be afraid to contact me. Our warlock made those just in case of emergency. No need to speak into them. I'm sure you'd prefer that anyway. He turns and walks back to his party, who are now headed to the stairs to retire for the evening. Shiv turns the stone over in his hand. Curiouser and curiouser, he thinks to himself. The hustle and bustle of city life was good for Shiv. He liked that the sounds could drown out any noise that would come from him. He'd had an early start, as the party was still in their rooms when he left. He had done his best work when he was entirely alone, and that's how he had always worked. There were times where he thought about how differently his life would have turned out had his family survived, but all that was in the past. Best not to meddle with things that were done and gone. Gliding through the crowd, he went unnoticed to many. The party was on their way to the city gates, and he was tailing them. After all, he was done with his scouting, and all he needed now was some time to plan his strike. Best to keep the party close by, in case he needed them to draw attention away from him. Obadiah and the cleric were talking to the guards, as the 2 females, no doubt one of them the warlock who made the stones, and the other a ranger, were taking stock of their inventory. The warlock stopped and looked at her stone, frowning and looking around before returning it to her pocket. She said something to the ranger, who in turn looked around as well, slightly pausing in Shiv's direction, and then returning to her task. Obadiah and the cleric finished their talk with the guardsmen and rejoined the women. All 4 begin to walk out of the city and onto the main path. Shiv follows a few hundred feet behind. The party are discussing amongst themselves as they walk, no thought given to their surroundings. Shiv eyed them warily, companions who were always a hindrance to him. They made their way a few miles down the road and eventually into the forest. Heading deeper into the woods, the group then came to a cave, where they made preparations to enter. Shiv was sitting by quietly, having been following the group quite a ways back so as not to alert the ranger. So far, so good, but it's been unusually quiet. I wonder if the rangers picked up on that. We may be in for danger. He sensed it before he heard the whistling of the knife. Leaning back instinctively, the blade narrowly missed as it whizzed by where his head once was. The unmistakable scent of foul poison filled his nostrils. Why is she here? He knew of only one person who used poison of such potency. I'll have words with Angela, but they may be the last she ever hears. Spinning quickly in the other assassin's direction, Shiv activated his hidden blade, readying himself. Angela burst forth from her hiding spot, tossing kunai towards Shiv. The look in her eyes was clear. It was either him or her. Shiv lunged forward, then dodged towards her left. Angela naturally countered by circling to her right to keep the fellow assassin in sight. What she failed to notice was the tangle of tree roots she had managed to land herself. She cleared the first 2 roots, but the third snagged her foot and brought her down hard. She rolled over quickly, but not fast enough to dodge Shiv's blade.
Striking true, it sank deep into her chest. Her eyes went wide with terror, then softened with saddened realization.
Must protect the...
She struggles to say the rest as she died in his arms. He reaches out and snatches the locket she always wore and sighed heavily. Shiv knew of only one reason she would be here, to carry out an assassination. Just then the party burst through the thicket and stopped suddenly at the sight of Shiv and the lifeless Angela.
What happened here?
The ranger asks, bow drawn taut.
It seems our friend here just saved our necks, Obadiah intercepted. Raven knew you were near. The geostone gave you away.
Told you, Marita, the black-haired warlock Raven states.
I said I didn't see him.
Doesn't mean he was never there, exclaims the fiery redhead.
Seems your stealth is too good for Marita.
Shut it, Gregory.
Both of you quiet. Shiv, you injured? Obadiah looks at him with concern.
Shiv? Like the Shiv? Exclaims Gregory. Shiv turns and nods to both in kind, then turns his attention back to Angela. He slowly closes her eyes and gently crosses her arms.
It seems you knew her. If I may, I can preserve her being and we can find a healer in town with Resurrect, Gregory offers, to which Shiv shakes his head. It's considered irreverent to revive a fallen assassin. She failed at eliminating her target, so that's the punishment.
Shiv turns to Obadiah, nodding his agreement.
Then let us bury her, for honor's sake.
After they had dug the grave and laid her to rest, Shiv placed her locket upon the makeshift marker of branches. One side, a picture of Angela. The other side, a dark-skinned dragonborn, crossed out with a red X. The party, now accompanied officially by Shiv, enters the cave. The walls glitter and glimmer from the moisture that has accumulated on its surface, while the torches dance in the still blackness of the cave. Obadiah leads as the rest fall in behind. Shiv tried his best to slink to the rear so that he may continue in silence, but Marita was keeping pace with him.
So, what brings a cold-hearted killer as yourself to our neck of the woods?
Marita, you know only one reason an assassin would come around. He has a mark to eliminate, quips Raven.
I know that, but what made him choose this job? I mean, why come this far out of the kingdom just to take care of a low-life crime boss?
I don't know, maybe the coin was good? But we all know that it was Obi that placed it. We all put our money together, and I doubt the captain gave Obi that much to help.
Maybe he likes the view.
Well, is that it? Raven's now staring at Shiv, her orb of illumination hovering over his shoulder. Shiv just stared straight ahead. He had no interest in this conversation. Raven furrows her brow and turns back around.
Have it your way, Sassin.
Shiv shakes his head as they continue. Further ahead, Obadiah enters a wide-open cavern. Bioluminescent moss casts a soft glow on the ceiling, and the torch and orb lights fill the chamber. On the far wall are goblin tapestries, with the crude painting of a dragon on them.
What in Azul's name is the clan of the Red Dragon doing here? Asked Gregory. It's not them. These are fakes to keep out any trespassers. They're pretty close, but this was done with dye and not by bloodberries.
Good eye, Marita, states Raven. Now all we have to do is... Die! A voice calls from the shadows. A figure in robes steps out with 4 bandits flanking him. Those who wish to die can come forward now. The others we'll let live as slaves.
Then your head'll make for a fine addition to my bounty collection, states Obadiah as he draws his bastard sword. Kill them!
The bandits rush forward, weapons ready. Obadiah ducks a wild swing by the first and sends him toppling over his back. Gregory engages the second, while the third locks swords with Obadiah. The robed figure hurls a spell towards Raven, but she counterspells in time to negate the effect. Marita has drawn a short sword, as the cavern proves to be a bit too confined for her to use a bow effectively. She moves towards the 4th bandit, as he eyes her up and down, smiling. "Oh, this'll be fun," he exclaims. The first bandit stands back up, slightly dazed at what had happened, then reorients himself to attack Obadiah from behind. He doesn't get the chance, as Shiv's hidden blade finds its mark. Now they had the advantage as Obadiah and Gregory finished off their opponents. Raven was struggling with the robed figure, while Marita was just plunging her sword in the 4th bandit's neck. He gurgled and fell to a lifeless heap on the ground. As the party readied themselves to take on the hooded figure, he raised his hand, a soft green glow emanating from his hand. "Arise and serve again!" The 4 bandits whom the party had just killed shook and clambered to their feet.
"A necromancer!" growls Obadiah. "I should have known this wasn't going to be easy. Unfortunately for him, I'm his worst nightmare."
Obadiah holds out his sword and casts Smite upon it, then slams it into the first reanimated corpse, sending bits of flesh and bone in every direction. Gregory swings his mace, enchanted with Bane of the Undead, and obliterates a second. The necromancer, upon seeing that he's outmatched, turns to flee, but there's a figure standing behind him. The sound of a blade entering flesh is heard, and he crumpled to the floor. The other two reanimations immediately started convulsing and drop as well, as their link to their life-giver had been separated. Obadiah and Gregory look up to see Shiv, standing over the necromancer with a dagger in hand. He wipes it clean on the necromancer's robes, then returns it silently to its sheath. I didn't even notice him move over there, stammers Marita, a look of shock on her face. Shiv places an open-palmed hand to his mask, then moves his hand outwards towards the party.
He's saying thank you, says Obadiah.
Obadiah then gestures towards Shiv with a few hand signs, to which Shiv replies in kind. What are they doing? Asks Gregory. Sign language, Marita replies. I used to use it all the time when I was with the Queen's Scouts. It's a great way to communicate without being heard by the enemy. I take it that he's incapable of speech, so this is how he communicates? Of course, it all makes sense why he's called Shiv the Silent. He can't speak. After cleaning up most of the corpses and staging the ambush to look as though an assassin had done the deed, the party made it back to the tavern. All that was left now was to get Shiv close to his target and let him work. Darkness crept across the town as night fell, but that was when Shiv was most active. Quietly, he slips into the alleyway, leading to the Cloud District. Making his way stealthily, he arrives at a large house made of stone, with the Hashkins and Pobble emblem on the gates. It was almost too easy to get inside, especially since it seemed they were on the move. Apparently, they deemed it more prudent to relocate, rather than increase security. Bad move. Once inside, Shiv made his way down the halls. This wasn't the first time he'd been here, but it may well be his last after tonight. He had a mission, and soon it would be over. Ducking past the very few patrols, he entered the study as quiet as a soft breeze. A rather stately-looking drow was sitting in his chair, going over what appeared to be shipping manifests. You're late, he says without looking up. I'd called for you to be here precisely at nightfall. We're still hours from being close to done. He stands up, still not looking in Shiv's direction. He walks to the window overlooking the vineyard. We can't afford to lose any more time on this. My suspicions about Madame Frau and Ugthar's alliance and their encroachment upon my spice operations seem to be true. They sent an assassin to eliminate my top executive. Don't worry, my pockets are deep, and I've hired a few of my own to take care of any potential threats. My hand has been forced, and now they shall see my true nature. By this time tomorrow I shall be the new mayor, and those that would see me dead will have been removed. Smiling, he turns around, only to find Shiv standing almost mask to nose with him. What in the name of... The sound of metal softly piercing flesh is heard. The drow looks at Shiv with sheer terror on his face. Shiv tilts his head and speaks in a raspy voice. My blade ends you, but another lays claim on you. For them, you must die. He gently lays the fallen lord on the floor, crossing his arms and closing his eyes. Retrieving a small wooden jar from his pouch, he proceeds to mark a red X over the portrait hanging in the office. And with that, the crime boss, who would be ruler of a prosperous town, was stopped for good. The following day, Obadiah is roused by a knock on the door. It's a courier with a note from the captain of the guard. He gathers his party and arrives at the barracks. There, the captain is waiting with a few other men.
Obi, good to see ya. You too, Percival.
To be honest, I never thought this plan would work out so smoothly. Thanks to a mysterious packet that made it to my door this morning, my men have been busy securing illegal assets and carrying out arrests. It seems as though Count Dracul had been planning on eliminating half the leadership in the city, as well as forcing his rivals out of business. Madame Frau's been taken into custody, but Ugthar has escaped. Safe to say that we may never see him again. That's great news, piped in Marita. Any word as to whom our source may be?
Funny you should ask. This was also left with the documents.
Percival places a small wooden jar with a rose engraved on its lid.
It contains a strange red substance. We found the same stuff on a painting in the Count's study along with his body.
Obadiah reaches out to take it.
Careful, one of the guards is in the infirmary after touching it with his bare fingers. It may be poisonous, although it doesn't appear as though the Count was killed by it.
Obadiah frowns and turns the jar over in his hand.
Thanks for the heads up, Percy.
Percival gives a slightly frustrated look at him.
I take it that you guys will be leaving soon?
Yeah, we'll be heading out in a few days. Got a job clearing out a kobold nest a few miles north of McCarnath.
Very well. Safe travels to you, Obi.
With that, the captain stood up and took his leave,
barking some orders to one of his men about what the latest was on the raids of the crime syndicate. Obadiah turns to his comrades, a worried look on his face. "What is it?" asks Gregory, having never seen Obadiah look this way. "Nothing," he replies. "Just a thought I was having. What do you say we have a drink?" "Obi, it's not even noon." "Ah, who cares? We've earned it." As they walk towards the door, Marita leans close to Obadiah. "Any word from our friend?" "No. I assume he has other affairs to attend to. After all, he is an assassin for hire, and one of the Black Hand's elites. You okay with all that's happened?" "I've made my peace and asked my God for forgiveness. Time will tell." 2 days later, the party's getting set to leave town. With the syndicate's leadership in disarray, the raids had proven more than successful. As further thanks for their hand in all this, Percival had slipped the party a hefty amount of coin that was never on the books. Raven and Marita had left for the market, gathering the last bit of essentials they needed before they left for Macarnath. Gregory was at the Temple of Light to acquire healing medicines and secure a few vials of the antidote that had been made. Obadiah stood on the balcony, overlooking part of the city. "You never left," he says to the shadow in the corner. Shiv steps out as Obadiah looks at him. "Thanks for your help these past few days." Placing a large bag of coins on the table next to him, he turns back to face the landscape. "You saved me from Hawthorne, but I'm confused on how you tried to pin the Count's death on her. I figured you just wanted to honor her memory, but the locket's another thing entirely." He turns towards Shiv, but he's not in the corner anymore. He's standing mask to face with Obadiah, who's the least bit startled by this. Obadiah reaches for Shiv's arm. The sound of metal softly puncturing flesh fills the silence. Obadiah releases Shiv, a calm look over his face. "And the truth comes to light," he says. Shiv speaks in his low, raspy voice. "One you have summoned. To them you owe a great debt. This one I am not. Assassin of Rose. Her target I did slay, yes, but you are my hit. Rest easy, warrior. Your days have come to an end. Fare thee well, Obi, my friend." Obadiah chuckles and coughs. A trickle of blood escapes his mouth. "Friend," he says. "I finally got you to say it." Shiv removes his mask. Dark scales glisten as a tear rolls down his face. As Obadiah's breath labors, the Dragonborn places him on the floor. "I knew that our reunion in that tavern was too good to be true." Obadiah stammers. "I wish that I would have never taken that job in the marsh." He continues. "I'm sorry." He exhales his last breath. "And I, to you."
That is a great way to get rid of a DMPC, and some amazing role-playing the group did. Please let us know what you think and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Things D&D. Our videos are posted every Tuesday and Friday, so stay tuned for more amazing Dungeons & Dragons content.